All right, so welcome to a hopefully brief, I can say that, executive session of the Special Committee on Housing. The first order of business I want to take up is we're receiving Senate messages. I just received a Senate message about HB 1168, which, if the committee remembers, is that study committee to deal with the housing crisis on people with disabilities. All the Senate did was amend it to put out the effective date, make an interim report on or before November 1st, 2024, and then have a final report by November 1st, 2025 to give them more opportunity to look into this should they want to. I am planning on concurring. Is there any objection to that? I just want to bring it across the committee. Concur. Okay. So the next order of business, I'll entertain a motion on SB 408, which is relative to the same study committee studying the impact of the housing crisis with people with disabilities.
I move ITL.
Okay, moved by Representative Reed,
Unless
ITL.
someone thinks differently.
Is there a second? Second by Representative Yokella. Any discussion?
It's the duplicate of what we'd passed and that the Senate just slightly changed and passed and that we're going to concur on.
Okay. So seeing no other comments, the clerk can call the roll.
Vice Chair Baruti. Representative McConkey.
Yes.
Representative Walsh.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Yokella.
Yes.
Representative DiLorenzo.
Yes.
Representative Reed.
Yes.
Representative Murray.
Yes.
Representative Damon.
Yes.
Chairman Alexander.
Yes.
Unanimous.
All right.
10-0.
We're going to put that on
Consent?
consent if
Thank
there's
you.
no objection. Awesome. So the last order of business we have is SB 527 relative to student housing. The committee heard testimony on a non-germane amendment a couple weeks ago after the public hearing on that. Representative Reed, I will recognize Representative Reed for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move amendment number 1752 and
I'll
wait for the
second that.
All right, thank you. And I would speak to that.
Go ahead.
So we had a hearing on a non-germane amendment to address the issue, as the chair just said, to address the issue of occupancy. And that amendment completely replaced the committee, the study committee on housing for students. And it was my understanding that while that is definitely a great step in the right direction, it's not a silver bullet. There are other issues impacting student housing that still would remain to be studied. And I thought that it would actually be more strategically helpful to combine them rather than replace, if for no other reason than the Senate is more likely to accept it if we're not taking out what they put in. So for the amendment before you simply adds the language of the non-germane amendment that we had the hearing on onto the bill, which is a study committee, rather than replacing it.
Okay. Any other comments on this amendment? Okay. Is a show of hands okay for the amendment? Oh, Representative Walsh.
Yeah, I guess I'll be consistent. I won't be supporting this amendment, not so much for another study committee that we probably don't need either, but on what the remnants of 1281 and what this does. And I don't know, I served a long time on a planning board, and it's my understanding that the majority of the time ordinances are created when towns have an issue. In the words of my late mentor, chair of Hooksett Planning Board for many years, he said, "Look, I don't like rules either." He said, and he said, but if everybody respected each other and each other's rights and property rights, we wouldn't need any of them. But that's not reality. I look at this, these are college towns for the most part that are doing this. I wasn't there. I don't know what kind of issues they have. And from what I heard at the hearing, by preventing them from doing this, we may get their issues back. And I did not hear, and I heard the contrary, that this probably isn't going to do anything for improving college housing anywhere, not for pricing, not for availability, because these are fixed numbers of students in most cases. Ordinance are there for a reason. Not every planning board and zoning board is nefarious. They had issues, they found a way to fix it, and keep in mind, this has been around since, what was it, 1986? So for those reasons, I just can't get into their issues without knowing why it started in the first place. Thank you.
Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate the concept that ordinances are there for a reason. I think that we strive at all levels of government to reach that balance, and the different levels of government are a type of checks and balance. So this is an example of where the state is stepping in and saying that those ordinances are overly restrictive, which we've seen time and time again. But yes, ordinances pertaining to behavior where it, as the concept is not respecting each other, things like loud behavior or garbage, those ordinances are untouched. And I think the point of the amendment, as we had the hearing on, is that we can have ordinances about behavior without discriminating against a type of person. And there's really no reason to say that students specifically or renters specifically should have restrictions that other people don't have. If it's a behavior problem, those ordinances are allowed. So I will support the amendment, obviously.
Representative Yochello.
Thank you. I think that I have to agree with the representative that this is really about discrimination, that this is about inappropriate discrimination of people and not an actual harm being perpetrated on the neighborhood or safety. It is essentially that those ordinances were placed, I think, on the books for. I saw an email that came out that was forwarded regarding this bill, that municipalities don't want to enforce these noise ordinances, or they're not cracking down on that. And I think that a single person living in their own house by themselves can be loud. I know, because I've had the cops called on me for being loud because I fell asleep while watching TV, and it was so loud that the neighbors can hear it. I was sleeping fine. And so I think that they were mad about that situation, and there was no one there except for me. And so I think that if there's a problem with noise, if there's a problem with trash, then they need to address that, through the health and safety type of situation. But if my girlfriend is there and we're not married, or we are married, that doesn't make us any more or less safe. I think that is, they're trying to capture something by regulating something else. And I think that just because it may be hard to, enforce noise ordinances at a certain time of day or something like that, that doesn't make it appropriate for them to discriminate in a different way to try and alleviate those issues. So I will be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Representative McConkey.
Thank you. I must have missed a meeting or one of these work sessions we had, so I apologize. I'm looking at the amended analysis. Bill includes student housing and municipal workforce housing regulations. So there's a definition for workforce housing, and this is adding this category in. Am I wrong about that?
I
Should
think
we
you're
get a copy?
addressing the bill as underlying bill, I believe, not the
I'm
amendment.
just going to your amended analysis on the back.
But the amended analysis still incorporates, it's not an analysis of the amendment. The amended analysis analyzes the entire bill should it be adopted with the amendment. So it's still speaking to the underlying bill. There's nothing in the amendment that talks about
Okay.
that.
But my point is, the bill does address that, and you're adding an amendment to that, and that's the amendment that's before me. And the is based on non-family relationships, marital status among the occupants' property, restricts the number of occupants of a single bedroom to less than 2. that means one person in only every bedroom in this building can only have one person? Is that what I'm reading here? Simple,
The
I'm a simple guy. Is that what I'm reading
The
here?
correct, so I'm as a co-sponsor of the original bill that was heard in municipal, killed, and then came forward as a non-germane amendment, which now this is the same amendment, but including the original bill instead of replacing. I will speak to I spoke in that hearing. So the issue is we have a number of towns, Durham is the number one town that spoke, that say that they will not allow, more than 3 unrelated people in a house, regardless of the number of bedrooms. And what this is saying is that at least a town has to allow couples one couple per bedroom.
That's not what this says. It says less than 2.
And what number?
Shall not restrict to less than 2, right?
Space restricts the number of occupants of a single bedroom to less than 2.
Which means 1.
Line 16.
Right, and line 11 says
Shall not adopt, line 11, shall not adopt any of the following, which is anything that restricts the number of occupants to a single bedroom to less than 2. So it cannot say that you can only have 1 per bedroom.
I'm looking at line 16.
Yeah. Line 11, so that's 1 and 2. Those numbers 1 and 2 are part of that list. The thing that's defining the list is in the paragraph above it. In its exercise of the powers granted under this subdivision, the legislative body of a city, town, village, district, or county in which there are located unincorporated towns or unorganized places shall not adopt, nor shall the governing body thereof enforce any ordinance related to the occupancy of any existing new or single-family duplex or multifamily dwelling unit that, 1, is based on familiar or non-familiar status, 2, restricts the number of occupants per bedroom to less than 2. So it shall not do 1 or 2.
And in the amendment, it says that B says that they can enforce the state building and fire code. So they can restrict it in cases of safety or health. Yep. Does that clarify your question? Representative?
I understand your point. I will not be supporting.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, is a show of hands okay for the amendment?
I don't know how they're gonna enforce. I still don't get this line 16, what this means. Less than 2, to me, says 1.
Go ahead, Representative Damon.
So if you read line 11 and then read that as the beginning of the sentence that continues with line 16, what it's saying is that it shall not adopt a restriction of the number of occupants of a single bedroom to less than 2. So in other words, it is permitting at least 2 residents per bedroom.
To be fair, they could have reworded that to say shall not restrict it to only 1. They just worded it differently to less than 2. Less than 2 means 1
It doesn't mean 1.5 or yeah.
or a half.
Representative Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess one other question that I did have when you're talking about not less than 2, if there were some other need, like a health need or a reason for them to be somebody to have a single room, that would be permissible. Is that what I'm hearing?
Representative Yockello.
I thank you. I think that question is essentially like if a person chose to have their occupancy of being 1 bedroom, but this is talking about the zoning saying the entire town, essentially, you cannot have, if you have a 2-bedroom house, you cannot have more than 3 people in your house, or because this is just occupants of a single bedroom, right? And so if they make a blanket statement of you have a 3-bedroom house and you can only have 4 people in the house, then that would essentially be in contradictory to this law, because that is less than 2 per bedroom. And so that would not be enforceable. However, you could choose to obviously inhabit a 3-bedroom house with only 1 person if you wanted to. They just wouldn't be able to mandate it.
Representative Reed.
I thank you again. And just very briefly, I think ideally we would say something like, if you're going to have restrictions, that the restrictions can only refer to like state building code or fire code. It has to be, if it's for, you can't discriminate based on renter or student or whatever, but it still allows that. It just says that you can't discriminate and restrict it to under 2. So it still allows that. So if the occupancy of a house is 10, they could still restrict it as long as it wasn't less than 2 and wasn't based on familial status. So I think we still give the municipalities lots of room to kind of get in there and see what's best for them. But I think this is a bare minimum that should be allowed.
Representative Walsh.
Last for me, as I said, I'm not going to be supporting it, but I just wanted to comment on this being discriminatory, and I disagree. This was challenged in court, if I'm not mistaken, and I think if it was found discriminatory in any way, I don't think it would have survived, but it did. So thank you.
Very briefly, please.
Very briefly, I appreciate that the definition in law of discrimination has to do with certain protected classes, and whether or not you're enrolled in school is not one of those classes. And so therefore it makes sense that the court case came the way it did. But we heard repeated testimony from people from Durham specifically saying this was meant in all of their ways, whether it was rental term or what have you, all other ways, they were specifically trying to target students. They said that. So you can say it's not discrimination legally, but I think all of us know that it's targeting a certain type of person.
Representative McConkey.
Thank you. Lastly, and I don't think you need my vote on this, and you're not getting it. We have a hard enough time sitting here trying to focus and be able with a straight face say what is workforce housing. I mean, it's the hardest thing. I'm going through it in my county and everything else. And here we open up another student housing in municipal workforce housing, and I think that makes it difficult to create workforce housing. So
And Representative, to address that, I believe the reason why it says in municipal workforce housing regulations is because that's the RSA they put it in. But the underlying bill 527 is merely a study committee to look into this. And then the non-germane amendment is just tacked onto the study committee. So I understand where you're coming from, but it's not. The
not
reason why
set.
they did it is because it's in that RSA. So I mean, the study committee will come up with what they come up with. But I think that the crux of this is the non-germane amendment, which I think is a valuable step in the right direction.
thank you.
Okay, are we ready? Or
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, seeing it is just a study committee, I think I'll let it, vote for it to go forward and let the study committee work out any other details.
Just point of order, point of clarification, if I
Yes,
may,
not a bad-
Mr. Chair. It is not just a study committee with a non-germane amendment attached to it, correct? There is another underlying bill.
The underlying bill is the study committee.
Yeah.
And then this adds that portion on, yes. This is unrelated, adds the unrelated renters ordinance.
But it's not related to the study committee, correct?
It's vaguely related in that the study committee is on student housing, how to deal with housing for students. And we had a bill in municipal that addressed that in this one area because towns were making it difficult for students to get housing.
Go ahead, Representative Wallace.
If I may, the study committee is the transport vehicle, if you will, for this reform.
I have a question
Representative DiLorenzo.
for Representative Reed. Representative Reed, when you, for the original bill, was there any discussion during committee that some of the student housing is zoned commercial?
In the hearing, I thought maybe you were present for the hearing. So I don't remember, maybe other members of the committee who were present for the hearing. I was, but I did specifically ask the representative for the senator who's the prime sponsor on the underlying bill, if at the time she was testifying against adding that non-germane amendment, and I asked her, would the senator be okay with us adding the language rather than replacing her underlying bill? And I took her answer to mean that would be fine.
So follow up, please. So this bill that I'm asking you about, Wasn't that the bill that was originally in municipal and county in the House?
Yes, and we have a member who serves on municipal who might be able to answer more questions.
Okay. And who is that? Representative Buchanan.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So this amendment is technically not the exact same bill. It's the same subject matter, but the wording is changed. There was not a list, all of that kind of stuff. And in that hearing, we did not discuss the commercial aspect of student housing. It was mainly about the discrimination and whether or not, you know, people next door or should be able to control how many non-related people are in a building, and then also regarding you know, is that a safety issue, and stuff like that. We didn't go into the
Okay.
commercial
Okay,
aspect.
thank you. May I
Absolutely.
follow up?
Go ahead.
So what my thinking is that I did some research and I looked at the assessors database in for Durham at least, and I noticed that some of the housing that's labeled student housing is coded or zoned commercial. So let me follow up. So my thought is that when you have people behaving badly in different like buildings, bars, or whatever, the onus is on the commercial owner to get that, you know, behavior cleaned up. So that may be more leverage for the townspeople who are offended by the behavior of the students. So, I mean, that's another way to think of it. Thank you.
Representative Reed.
I would just add to that, if it is accurate, that that kind of brings into question some of the complaints about ruining residential neighborhoods if they're actually in commercial zones to begin with, then what residential neighborhoods are you ruining? But I will say that we have to kind of deal with what we have today, and I don't know about deadlines and stuff, but we're rapidly running out of time.
This amendment I feel is completely reasonable, and the study committee on student housing will look further into that issue that you just raised.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, are we all set to vote? Okay, is it Representative Wallace?
Yes, just, I understand it's all late, but to address your question, there are many places throughout the state where there are existing residential properties in zones that are now commercial. If those properties were ceased to be residential for a year and a day, they can no longer be occupied as residential. They would decay to a commercial.
Oh, good information.
Property.
Sorry for
Representative Walsh? Go ahead.
Well, there's also plenty of other places that commercial does allow residential components. It doesn't have to be changed. There's a lot of mobile home parks, for another one, are allowed in commercial zones. So the testimony we heard is that the student housing is basically available for the majority of the town around the college itself, and that this ordinance actually just starts to get applied as you get towards the outskirts into the single-family neighborhoods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are also mixed-use zoned items as well, so it can be commercial and residential together. So there's that caveat as well.
All right, all those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay, so the amendment carries 8-2. Is there another motion?
So we had to move ought to pass first before,
Yep.
but I don't think we did. Did we move ought to pass first?
The amendment was approved.
No, but you have to actually move ought to pass, then approve an amendment, and then the motion is ought to pass is amended automatically. So I will move retroactively ought to pass.
You already did that.
I moved the amendment. Which is different than moving ought to pass. Procedurally, you have to move ought to pass, have that seconded.
It was handled.
Right.
It's already. You
Oh,
did- you
I did
move
it? Okay,
Yes.
thank you so much, Mr. Clerk. Okay, in
Now
that
we
case.
need a second.
We need a second. And I have no further discussion.
Any discussion on ought to pass as amended? Okay, seeing none, will the clerk will
Okay.
call a roll.
Vice Chairman Baroudi. Representative McConkey. Representative Walsh.
No,
Clerk votes yes. Representative Yokella.
Yes.
Representative DiLorenzo.
Yes.
Representative Reed.
Yes.
Representative Murray.
Yes.
Representative Damon. Chairman Alexander.
Yes.
8-2.
Will there be a minority report?
Probably not.
Okay.
I would move consent if there's no objection.
Is there?
I'm sure it's gonna be spot on the floor, but I don't think.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna leave it on the regular calendar so it doesn't end up at the end of the schedule at the end of the day. Okay. So with that, you're responsible for 2 reports.
Yeah.
Get them to me by like tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. We're all set. I have to jet to work.